everybody. It is Friday, and that means it's 1 o'clock. That means I'm here interviewing. This is Lincoln Reichen. He is the managing principal broker for Southwest Suburban Remax Equity Group.
Got it.
I did. That's a long title. Basically, he's the boss of this branch of Remax where I work. So he's my boss. Yeah, he's more my mentor than anything. He's done wonders for me. Anyway, Lincoln's been in the market for 15 years.
Right.
You've been running this branch for 3, right?
Start number 3.
Yeah, so he knows what he's talking about. That's why I brought him in, because I'm not the one to be asking these questions. So I have a few questions for him. He's going to answer them. If anybody has any questions while they're watching this, fork them out. I'll try to get them to them. If not, you can add them later, and then I will ask him and give you the answers. So the first question I have is, since we're mainly focusing on the housing market and trends and how to identify them and stuff like that, the first question I have is, what defines a seller's market versus a buyer's market? What's the main difference and what defines each of those?
Okay. I think the biggest difference, the metric we look at more than anything else, is the inventory level. So in a buyer's market, you're obviously going to have more inventory available. It's going to put downward pressure on prices. And in a more active market, like we've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years, you have a much lower inventory level. So traditionally, from an economic standpoint, 6 months has been considered a balanced market. So anything under 6 months has been considered a seller's market. Anything above that is a buyer's market. To put that into context, because those are just kind of arbitrary numbers, back when we were in the midst of the housing crisis in 2009, 10, and 11, in the Portland market, we got as high as 19 months of inventory. So there was a lot of available properties out there. And currently, we are at 1.8 months of inventory. So again, currently, there's not a lot to choose from for buyers. Therefore, that's putting upward pressure on prices. Therefore, we would consider this a seller's market.
Okay, that brings me to another point. You mentioned inventory, and that we're at 1.8. That's 1.8 months of inventory. Yeah. Does that mean, how is that determined? Like, what does that actually mean in realistic terms? Like, does that mean, oh my God, we're going to run a house in 1.8 months? Or what? Like, it's a pretty confusing number. How would you explain that to somebody?
I think the simple way to think about it is, if every house on the market in Portland were to sell, it would take 1.8 months to get rid of the whole lot.
Huh.
They would all be gone.
Okay. And what are typical indicators that are good to look for to determine whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market? Like, just non-obvious ones, but yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I would say there's a couple of things for sure. I look at the jobs report every month. That comes out on the first Friday of a month. Unemployment right now is at 3.5, 3.6%, close to a 50-year low. So people are working. So that's a good start. If you dig deeper into that, you want to look at wages. Are people making more money than they were previously? And at this point, we're seeing an uptick in wages. So we're right around 2.93% for the average wage increase. So theoretically, people are making more money. There's more discretionary income to spend on things like housing. Consumer confidence is another metric I look at every month. And right now, the consumer is extremely strong. I would say 70% of our GDP is based on consumer spending. And right now, the consumer is feeling good about themselves. They're feeling good about the economy. They're feeling good about their future. And typically, that's going to portend to them spending money on cars, boats, housing, things like that. 2 other things that I would say that maybe aren't quite as obvious are the economic engines in your city humming along.
Okay.
And if you look in Portland in the last 3 to 4 to 5 years, you look at some of our big economic engines, Nike, Intel, OHSU, for instance, they've all been in expansionary mode. We're seeing new buildings, we're seeing jobs added, and those are good things, because if your big economic engines are roaring, a lot of times you'll see that trickle down to smaller businesses as well. And if you drive around town right now, just anecdotally, you see a lot of hiring or help wanted signs. You don't see a ton of vacancy commercials on the commercial side either. And the last thing I would say is, are developers in your marketplace? And this one, I think you can go around Portland. There's crane towers everywhere still. Look at all the new hotels in town. I think there were 12 hotels in the Portland metro area completed in the last 2.5 years. They just finished the convention center hotel, 600 rooms.
Yeah.
These are things, these are companies that spend a lot of dollars on due diligence. There's a lot of investor dollar. So they want to know, hey, is this a viable market? And it seems like right now the answer is that yes, Portland's a viable market. So again, these are things that are going to bring jobs into our marketplace, bring new talent into our marketplace, and I think those are going to be really good for the housing market.
Perfect. What should one look for when initially viewing a house? Like, if somebody who doesn't know anything about houses or roofs or anything like that, what are some major things that can stand out to somebody who doesn't know anything when you're looking at the house?
Sure, and that's going to be somewhat subjective based on what that particular buyer's needs are and concerns are in a house. But I would say the things that tend to muddle deals, where transactions go to die, typically are several areas. It's usually roof, siding, crawl space issues, foundation issues, just some of the day-to-day functions of the house, the furnace, is there a old oil tank in the ground, things like that. Has there been contamination? Those are typically the things that are going to cost thousands of dollars to repair or replace, and that's oftentimes where you see deals have a tough time. Now, as far as what you're looking for in a home, right now, kind of trending the last 10, 15 years, a lot of buyers like the open concept, kind of where it's a more open on the main level, the kitchen flows right into the living space.
That's called a great room, right?
Great room
That's
concept.
different, yeah.
It's not as choppy or boxy as maybe some of you see in older homes. A lot of people like master on the main right now. People are downsizing. They want to have that master bed on the main level. Yeah, that's become real important for a lot of people. And then things typical things a house on a cul-de-sac is going to be good. Are you back into a major road? Schools obviously have become really important for a lot of families. So there's a lot of variables that go into it outside of just the physical structure. But I would say that, as far as the physical structure, roof, siding, crawl space are pretty important things. And again, those are things that will come up. Hopefully you have a good agent representing you, and then also will come up in your inspections.
We'll get to the agent part here in just a minute. So the market now, you mentioned about how Portland market especially is looking really good right now. Where do you think it's headed in, say, the next 5 years or so? Do you think it's going to be flat for the most part, uptick high, go down a little bit? Where do you think that's going to head?
I think we're going to be in a stable to upward mobility place in the housing market. I think, again, the economic metrics look good. The inward migration numbers are good. We're still about 58% of the moves in Oregon are in versus out. So again, we're seeing more people come in than leave. So we like to see that, and that was we led the country in that for 3 years. We're not number one anymore, but we're in the top 10 still. I think Boise's number one. I think Idaho's number one.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a good space. And again, like I said, we're seeing some things like the new wing at PX, the Terminal E. That's a big deal. The max extension of Barber is going to probably, it's going to come to the ballot, but probably going to happen in the next 7 to 8 years.
I-5 Rose Quarter.
I-5 Rose Quarter. So we're seeing some big projects like that. The Ritz-Carlton's coming to town. Now, again, doesn't matter if you like that or not, but the reality is that's a big company. They've never had a presence in the Northwest. Again, it's the type of company that's done some due diligence and decided that there's a demographic here that will support that hotel. Right. And that the tourism here and the business traveler is going to come in and use their facility. So things like that, I think we're in good shape the next 3 to 5 years.
Something else that pointed out, it literally just popped in my head. Lincoln pointed this out to me. Along the West Coast for the major cities being Seattle, here Portland, LA, San Diego, San Francisco, along the West Coast, Portland is still the cheapest by a pretty significant margin, actually. And I know it seems like housing is expensive, and it is compared to 10 years ago, especially. But we're still the cheapest option going up and down the West Coast, which I actually didn't know until you pointed that out. It's pretty astounding. So this is the question. It's not about housing market. It's about what we do. I know what the advantages are, but I think I'd rather have somebody who's been in the business longer explain it. So what are the advantages of using a broker versus selling your house on your own or buying a house without a broker, or using an online source such as Zillow or Redfin or something? What are the advantages? Like, we're still here as brokers. There's a reason for that. Why are we so important in the purchasing of a home or selling a home? That's
Great question, and I think the digital platforms like Zillow and Redfin have definitely put pressure on the traditional agent. But I think at the end of the day, we're still here, and we will continue to exist in the future. I think it's actually been a good thing for our industry. I think we've had to tighten up our game. I think we've had to, just pay more attention to some of the details. Oftentimes, with some of the digital platforms, they're not taking everything into consideration when they come up with their price estimates. So I think having that professional who knows the area, has spent some time looking at the comparables, looking at the history in the area, is there anything going on in the area, is there anything coming to the area that may be a positive, or maybe there's something coming to the area that's going to be a negative and put downward pressure on property value. So I think things like that are always important to look at, and hopefully a good agent's going to have that information for you. And then the other piece, I think, on the negotiation side is always going to be relevant. We're always going to want somebody who's advocating for us, negotiating our best interest, whether we're on the purchase side or on the selling side. So, again, I understand it, especially in an active market. It's attractive, or you can think, oh, I can save myself a few $1,000 if I just try this on my own. But just from an exposure level, having that RMLS presence, I think the RMLS is going to get the property out to all the agents in all of Portland, and then it's going to be syndicated out to Redfin and Zillow. So those digital platforms don't exist without us putting that property into the RMLS. So I do think from an exposure perspective, your property is going to get better exposure. Hopefully we're going to be your best advocate negotiating for you. So, again, if you can save $4,000 or $5,000 by not using an agent, I would hope most agents could recoup at least that for you in a traditional transaction.
Yeah, most of the time significantly more.
Hopefully.
Especially there are things that people don't consider, especially on online sources such as the new major road going in behind a new construction house. That the online person is going to know that. However, a realtor, we have people that we can talk to that will tell us these things. Oh, there's going to be a big major road going in behind there. And that's going to affect the negotiation of the price. As you pointed out, they're just things that online services just literally can't do. They can't go and inspect a roof for you. They can't hire a professional photographer for you. And as a listing agent, if we hire a professional photographer, that actually we pay for that. That's not something that the seller usually pays for. That's part of our process. That's part of the service we give to you. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about stuff like that. We do offer a lot more and a lot more personal touch, and we are your advocate. We're not just somebody trying to make a buck. We're literally fighting for you.
The process has become more complex, and I think one of the major roles we play as agents is to minimize surprises for our clients, whether buyer or seller. So if we can minimize surprises for you and simplify that process and get you from point A to B and hand you the keys, that's where our value is, and that's where our value will continue to be. And really, the market fluctuations, up or down, I still think there's going to be a need for professional real estate agents.
And by law, we have to tell you what our fee is up front. Zillow and Redfin don't. They could have fees on the back end, or it's only 1%, but you have to pay extra for this, and that's not the way it works for us. My last question for Lincoln here. In 2004, a team accomplished what is considered the biggest choke ever in sports history, like ever. In all sports, you got all sports. They were up 3-0. I believe, no. Yeah. 3-0 in the playoffs, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, 3-0 in the playoffs. And then they lost 4 straight. Who was that team?
Well, Chris, thank you for asking. That team would be the New York Yankees.
Yes, it would be.
The ALCS.
Yes.
And the team that they gave up those 4 games to were the Boston Red Sox.
Who hadn't won in a World Series in,
I think at that point it was 1918.
Yeah.
So it had been a while. The year before, 2003, the Yanks had won Game 7 walk-off style with Aaron Boone.
Yeah, but that team didn't choke to do that, did it? So
it was a tough way to end 2004.
That was a wonderful way to end 2004.
I'm over it now, but it took a long time.
I bet it did, yeah.
But thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, headline, choke. Pretty sure that's all the New York Times headline was, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Yeah, just choke.
Yeah.
They showed the little Alex Rodriguez like a little catch.
I'm so glad we got this covered. I knew it was going to be something along these lines.
All right, you guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you had lots of information from this. Like I said, Lincoln's literally a door across from me. So if you have any questions that come up at all, just type them in the comments or shoot me a message or whatever, and I can ask him, or if I know it, I'll answer it. I don't know as much as he does. I don't think anybody knows as much as he does, but we'll get there. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I will
Thank
see you
you.
next week.
Sounds
Have a good
good.
day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Too short?